Welcome to the Business Legends Podcast, where we interview business leaders and entrepreneurs so that you can learn from their successes, become inspired, and meet the people to make change happen. I'm the host of the show, Reese Arn, along with my co-host, Christian Webb. Thanks for joining us this week. You missed out last week, buddy.
Yes, sir. I think you fumbled over your mustache a little bit there, but I was all right.
Yeah. Christian may mention, for those of you that are listening on audio, my hair is doing something a little wildness today. I got a little llama lick situation in the back, so I'm just encouraging all of you to check that out on video. Today we are joined by a dear friend of ours, amazing entrepreneur, master of the universe himself, Chad Jenkins, CEO of SpeedSpark. Chad, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking very forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Let's dig into it. So, for our listeners, let's just talk a little bit about what SpeedSpark is, get you a little bit of recognition for that. So, tell us about your business.
Okay. SpeedSpark itself partners with organizations all over the world, typically small to medium-sized businesses, on their growth. So, we only partner on future earnings. That's it. And it's through growth innovation that we're seeing exponential outcomes for all different types of businesses and shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
Whether it be doctors, lawyers, service companies of all different shapes and sizes, and then also manufacturing. So
Wow.
a lot of fun.
So the key thing you said there to me at least was growth innovation. And
Yes.
so, how long have you guys been in business, first off?
We're getting close to 20 years.
Wow.
SpeedSpark had an interesting beginning. I owned many different companies at the time in which I started. I want to say it's 2005 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
I just recently opened the first BlackBerry store in the world. That kind of dates me.
Oh, wow.
That was a thing.
That's
back then, of
crazy.
course.
Yeah.
And what I found out is I could...
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wow.
All the clients that I was serving in other businesses, they would have operational challenges with efficiency that could be solved by just creating web applications that would automate business processes and delivering it across the BlackBerry web browser. And even a Nextel telephone web browser way back in the day for a company that you might be familiar with, Maersk.
Yeah.
You know, the big shipping container?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we would validate delivery of the shipping containers across the Nextel telephone at that time, and the web browser operated at 19.2.
Wow.
So that's where SpeedSpark originally started, is operational efficiency applications and just automated processes.
Wow.
So we've moved, of course, beyond many other business offerings. We've spun out 4 companies that have been created and birthed. They just get to a certain size, and now I try to hire leadership teams as quickly as possible in organizations. I even have something called Nothing New Without a Who.
Okay.
I developed that the first quarter of last year, which means I can and refrain to start a business without somebody to run the day-to-day first. So SpeedSpark itself had 3 or 4 different operating companies under its umbrella: digital marketing, as I mentioned, the original, business process automation through software and low-code, no-code solutions, and then cybersecurity and managed services for about 400 to 500 companies.
Wow.
So we recently, as of Jan 1, we branded each one of its sub-companies, and SpeedSpark, which has always stood for seed the idea, spark the growth. Doesn't really go with cybersecurity.
Yeah.
For me personally, because I try to look at things horizontal as the impact that we're making on the organization from a perspective of growth. Because if you look at the digital marketing, cybersecurity, managed services, and then application development to automate business processes, that's a little bit out of order. We would first engage with an organization to make sure that their technology was sound and they were secure.
Mm-hmm.
Then we would look at their business processes and begin to automate those. I'm a big proponent of creating enterprise value. So I love today, and we mentioned it a little bit before the show, that there are a ton of low-code, no-code solutions that you can begin to get started with and cut your teeth with, but there is a brick wall that you will run into.
Right.
So SpeedSpark originally started with creating custom applications, and we still do today, which adds enterprise value to the small to medium-sized organizations, because what is running their organization, you can't go buy off the shelf.
No.
It is their proprietary process. Owning that in a separate organization and leasing it back to your primary also validates that your intellectual property has enterprise value separate than the cash flows of your business. So I'll go back. Making sure that you have the infrastructure correct and sound so you have a platform that you can build upon. Because the worst thing you can do is begin to grow exponentially and the wheels get extremely wobbly.
Mm-hmm.
Automating the processes with the software application and custom applications enables you to begin to capture that growth and scale. Now we're ready to pour some gas on it. Digital marketing. So SpeedSpark itself comprised all of that originally, and the market is very understanding of a digital marketing firm or a custom application and business process automation firm or a cybersecurity and managed services firm. So at the beginning of this year, we have now branded those individually because their revenue is certainly sustainable, plenty enough. They stand on their own. It's a SpeedSpark owned company, and SpeedSpark itself, full circle to where we started, only focuses on the growth, innovation applied to businesses across the world.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's incredible just listening to you. I think a lot of companies in general will do one thing. They do one thing especially well or whatever, no matter what that is. Painting or mechanic work or whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. But it seems like you took kind of a grand enterprise level approach with one hand feeding the other between cybersecurity, digital marketing, application development, and ultimately custom solutions for enterprise products and things like that. Did you launch all of that at the same time, or have you kind of grown into that over the years?
It's interesting. I mentioned 05, 06, 09. In 09, I sold quite a few companies, and I retained ownership of one managed services firm. In 2011, I decided to put it under SpeedSpark, trying to reduce my complexity, because as you can probably pick up, I am absolutely a simplifier. Are you guys familiar with simplifier, multiplier?
Yeah,
okay. Which is real confusing because you are both, but you are one primarily.
Sure.
So it looks like I'm a multiplier. That is completely incorrect. I'm a simplifier. I just look at many different things and see how I can combine them for additional value, and it looks complex, but to me it's very, very, very simple. So SpeedSpark itself started with the apps. I merged a managed services firm that I had separately. I developed the digital marketing firm with the internal team. So it was a little bit over time. And then the growth innovation, it is new as a service offering. It is exactly what I've been doing even way back into my child years, to be honest with you.
Oh wow! So hold on. Let's talk about that. So child years. What was it in your child years that you were thinking about that, like? Are you thinking about building a mechanical toy or something like that, and making it simple as possible, or?
What I've noticed, and this is not only me, but people are motivated by fear and greed. So the answer is yes on both of those. I was 8 years old. I grew up on a farm in Pageland, not very far from here, but way out in the country. And I joke that time moves backwards. Even in the time that we're together, you probably can interpret that I'm not really farm friendly.
Yeah, I can see that.
It would have been better if I'd have been.
Neither are we, by the way.
In the middle of Manhattan, just the way in which I process things. So at 8 years old, I figured out rough order of magnitude what my father made. I did the reverse math all the way back down to the second.
Wow.
And I added a zero to it. Because, of course, it was a smaller number. It wasn't as overwhelming as the big number.
Right.
But then that's by the second, and I added a zero to it. So at that time, it became very apparent to me that my focus had to be on value creation. It's the same thing today. So how did I do that back then? Because you're on a farm, I'm doing manual post holes or putting up barbed wire fence or bush hogging pastures for all day long. What do I have, and how can I create value for others? Well, I had been riding horses since before I could walk, and I went to horse sales. And that was one of my first collaboration, which I am a huge collaboration guy. I've even created methodologies around multiple stages of collaboration that create exponential growth. But even back then, I, of course, had no words for it. But I tend to look at existing resources and look at them in their authentic expression, not with the label that's on the outside of the bottle. I also look at businesses that way. So applying that methodology at its most infancy stages, way back when, what are the facts? I'm a child, that's true. I learned to ride before I could walk, so I can make a horse look like anybody could ride it. That is also true.
Right.
Not that anybody could ride it, but I can make it look like that.
Sure.
And I go to these sale barns, and there are people that want to sell horses and there are people that want to buy horses. Well, if I just combine those resources, I can create more value. Me and my skill set applied to the guy who wants to sell a horse is helping the guy who wants to buy a horse perceive that anybody could ride this horse. Not 100% true, but the value was increased. And they would be happy to pay me $20 per.
Oh, yeah.
So I was making, a few $100 a week.
That's
8,
awesome.
9, 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
And then I used that cash to buy my first piece of dirt when I was 14.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. You always hear about people that, entrepreneurial spirits that are that age and they mow lawns or something like that. And that's such a unique way that you approach that from an entrepreneurial journey type of a thing. So,
what was your first piece of dirt?
Oh man, I think it was a government sale in Macby, South Carolina, down a dirt road.
Wow.
Obviously not a lot of market intelligence around this. And I ended up, for the cash that I had made all those time riding horses, or riding horses through sale barns, I was able to use and buy that piece of dirt, and I ended up making money on that piece of dirt.
Wow.
But I had no idea what the heck I was doing, and I do that a lot. You get started.
Yeah.
Right? There's a quote that I actually live by, because in business, and I deal with probably 10 different businesses all across the world in all different industries every day. And I hear this, we're going to do something when interest rate falls. We're going to do something when they finally put that road in. And we're going to do something when we hire that guy or build that building. I'm like, I don't live by that. There's a quote by Thomas Wagner, which was actually a squire of Teddy Roosevelt. Do what you can with what you have, what you are, where you are. I was on a farm. I had to do what I could with what I had where I was, and that created my first business. I do the same thing today.
Wow, that's incredible. We're very lucky on this show because we get to meet so many amazing people such as yourself. But I love
free consulting.
Yeah, it really
free
is.
consulting,
Or like I don't know. I treat it kind of like higher education. Because learning life story is a part of how education is simplified. I think.
Experience is the best professor.
Right. Yeah. There you go. Perfect. And I don't know. It's just incredible hearing about different entrepreneurs and their journeys. And the thing I think is particularly incredible about you is that you track it back all the way to back then. You track it back to some of those personality characteristics, and you still apply them to this day. Like, we should all be so lucky,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, when we get away from the simple things, make it easy for people to do business with you. One of my earlier businesses was in the wireless phone industry, and that particular type of device was used very deeply in construction vertical. Where are they? Production neighborhoods. So I set up the entire, actually, city of Charlotte, like ice cream truck routes. And I had little vehicles that would go through the Pulte neighborhood, the DR homes. Lenore wasn't here at that time, but who's in the neighborhood? The brick mason.
Yeah.
The drywall guy, the irrigation guy, the grading contractor, the roofer, the framer, and I could continue going on and on. And what do they use? That device.
Yeah.
Do you want to take your guys off the job where they're making you money and send them to the store at the corner and stand in line at Verizon? Or do you want to pay my guys when they come by your neighborhood? It's just like the trucks that come around that feed them in the morning, the Bojangles and stuff. They might call it the Roach Coach or something like that.
Yeah.
So I did that for wireless phones and Blackberries.
Wow.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
So that's a fundamental though, right? Make it easy for people to do business with you.
Yeah.
There's another example of that I extensively leverage today because I believe that the art of collaboration is one that you don't see prolifically used in business, and I think they're leaving so much money on the table. And I'll if you'll give me a second, I'll frame this up. Your hero target, which is the person you or your business wants to be a hero to, they're on their own growth journey. That's the way I quantify it. Before you engage with them and do whatever it is that you do, they're engaged with a person, place, or thing before. By the same token, whenever you meet them along their growth journey, and you engage with them and you deliver exceptional value to them, if you study them, every time you do that, there's a commonality in their behavior and their actions. Beyond them engage with you, they take this action, they engage with that company, and they always do it. You may consider, along your growth strategy, to engage with who comes before you and engage with who comes after you in collaboration and deliver that as a service to that hero target. Because didn't that just make them easier for people to do business with you?
Yeah.
And did it also create competitive advantage? Because nobody else can deliver that. We talked a little bit about that with the gentleman from Newfoundland this morning, right?
Yeah.
In a very minute concept or about application, but it's pretty profound for him here to your core business. Combining those in collaboration, you basically 3x your sales force.
Yeah, because you're selling the same solution, or I mean not the same, but
us on a marketing firm, there's a collaboration that I wanna make work that we haven't quite made work yet, but it's still in process. Like I keep trying to dig for the right person. Is brokerages, business brokerages. Every time somebody buys a business, they want to make that baby their own.
Sure.
The very next thing they ask is who's the local accountant in the area that I can trust, who builds websites, who changes X, Y, Z about my brand, who can get my presence and let everybody know that I now own this business. Maybe even a complete rebrand. That almost happens every time that a business is purchased, not by a roll-up company, but by a person.
Yeah, by an individual.
And I'm like, there's got to be some kind of setup there that works well between a marketing firm and a brokerage firm.
You find the two firms, and I can help connect the dots for them. That'd be a great collaboration partner.
There you go. Then we'll have a third. That'd be awesome.
we could have three.
In your example, one thing that I feel like most organizations don't, they are currently, all businesses are in collaboration to some degree. There's a friend of mine, Dean Jackson, that came up with a methodology called the success criteria: vision, capability, and reach. You have one or two or three of them.
Mm-hmm.
For the one that you don't have, in collaboration with somebody else, it gives you the opportunity to grow exponentially. So here, whenever you combine these things, you don't, oftentimes, they're engaged with somebody for vision or capability or reach, and there's a gentleman's agreement. And sometimes they pass clients back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned it a little bit before we began. If we both had a baby in our personal lives, do we call it the baby? And the answer is no, because who could tell whose is who within reason? But in our business, we don't take that approach. But if you look at the stock market and the amount of value that is currently based upon hard assets or intellectual property, I believe in the early 80s or might have been the 70s, it was 92% hard assets, 8% intellectual property. It's the exact opposite now.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It might even be 96-4 intellectual property. But yet, these guys have unique processes in their business. They don't name them. It's totally baffling to me. In this collaboration as well, they also don't apply that same methodology. You must name it. Because whenever you give something a name, just like the baby, it has its own identity. The world can begin to embrace it. So naming that collaboration as a service, and that, to me, it doesn't matter. In what I would classify as first stage, you're able to name it just with a code name. Second stage, when you name it, it can exist on your website, my website, and your website. Well, third stage is now, if you're listening to consumers, or specifically your hero targets, they begin to ask for that individually. They don't want to deal with three different people. You're beginning to evolve an industry. So leveraging collaboration, I began that way, is something I do not see heavily used in business today, although many of them are collaborating at some level for vision. They may be going to conferences and things like that. They're in collaboration with whoever that is, but they're not thinking about what all they could actually create just with these simple methodologies.
Yeah, I think it stops in the middle. I think a lot of times it kind of stops where like you're just trading clients back and forth.
Yeah, you're just friends. Yeah. And it does work, of course, but consider if you would just give that thing a name.
It could really work.
Yeah.
Something that meant something to the hero target.
Yeah.
Right.
Instead of getting like 1 or 2% of their client base, you could be a part of the whole shebang.
Yeah. Gosh.
It's all rooted in value creation for that hero. Everything that we talk about today is, and everything I've ever done is value creation for that hero target.
Yeah.
How do you make it easier for them to do business with you? It's the simplest concepts that we tend to move away from until we go away once a year. And what do we talk about? Get back to basics.
Right.
And then you come back and you get more complex.
Right.
But leveraging those simple complex is rewarding and freeing.
Yeah, for sure. What we're talking about reminds me of long ago. Christian and I were personal trainers. I know you can't believe it, but
not anymore.
It was funny because whenever talking about the spirit of collaboration and the spirit of history too, just like you with moving back to 8 years old and those fundamentals of business, at our gym, whenever they would sell a new gym membership, they would always introduce them to our side of we call it our side because all the fitness consultants that were selling gym memberships were on this side and all the personal trainers were on this side.
Oh, yes.
And so we handed off to each other. And then it was funny because we collaborated, because if we had a good relationship with a personal training client, then they would sell more gym memberships. And
Absolutely.
then it's just, I know that's super simple, but
it works.
It works
the cool
perfectly.
thing about this example, though, is they were actually 2 different businesses.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yeah, it was I think it was like ABC Consulting or something,
Okay.
and then
ABS.
ABS
Yep.
Consulting, and then Sports and Fitness.
Yep.
So they literally collaborated in the same gym to basically pull more finances out of each member.
Yeah.
Which I thought that was very interesting.
It is very interesting.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're talking about there.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love it.
It's so cool to just hear that and I want to go back to something that you said, Chad, that I mean was very well said. Businesses don't do that enough. They in this day and age they don't take that next step of mutual growth, mutual innovation, and things like that.
Yeah, I mean it's embarrassing, but I mean I feel like I've even gotten away from it, and I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Conventional blinders.
Yeah. For sure.
Get back in it.
I mean, other industry terms, when I say terms, revenues, their margins, their gross profit, there's best practices. You know what best practices really mean, right? Average.
Yeah. Right.
So
it's true.
We're shooting for average.
Yeah.
I'm not, as I mentioned, I'm not a Me Too guy at all.
Yeah.
And I love best practices as an awareness and as a frame of reference. I'm absolutely not going to create my goals to get the best practices because at its root it is average.
Yeah. Or the acceptable standard, which is
what a great point.
Yeah. Which is really a shame. We attended a construction conference. Gosh, it's been like 2-3 years ago or something like this, and they had a speaker there that was talking about diversity, inclusion, and everything, and it was just it was. I found it very sad because she was talking about how the industry as a whole doesn't, they meet the bare minimum requirement, and hardly any construction firms try to go above and beyond that, to try to integrate, diversity within their organization. And then, a lot of the GCs that were there, and these are big GCs, and they don't mind speaking up about what they feel about things. And, they said, look, like, this is what we want. We want to include people with more diverse backgrounds in the system, but what about what it costs, because we have to include like a bunch of different stuff in there with it,
That's certainly one way to look at it.
Yeah.
I would encourage them, even at that particular time. I deal in outcomes, right? So, and I mentioned, I think even earlier, looking at something's authentic expression, not based upon whatever the label is on outside of the bottle. Looking at those folks that have diversity, they have a different background, different skill set, different worldview, that can be leveraged.
For sure.
That can add value in the way in which you deliver your product or service, which is just a little different way of looking at it. So the cost is actually an investment if we approach it the particular way. And I only deal in future money because every dollar that we have in our business is already committed.
Wow.
So here, before I'm trying to sell you something today, I'm asking you to not do what you had already planned. Don't spend that money there. Give it to me. It seems like a horrible idea.
But we know you, so we think it's a great idea.
So it feels much better if I would say, okay, and focus on where you're going. What do you have at your disposal? How can what I do help you get to the outcome, and then understand the impact of that outcome to you, and let's just split the upside. Wealthy people don't trade time for money.
Right. That's true.
Why do so many folks do that?
Yeah.
So in this scenario here with the diversity and inclusion, that I love the diversity and inclusion so that. So that is very powerful 2 words. You can create the outcome.
Right.
I mentioned just dealing in outcomes. So it's just a different way of looking at it.
For sure.
I'm glad that they're doing something.
Yeah.
For sure.
They're doing a lot. We discussed before the podcast that we're involved with some construction organizations and things like that, and I'm really pleased with the things that they're doing, the steps they're taking with a lot of that stuff. And
wonderful.
And it's a really great thing. One of the things that I remember from that as well is that they implement certain standards within organizations, and that's not to say it's unionized or anything like this, but they implement certain standards for hiring practices and things like that. That gets back again to what you were saying about best practices. So but at least they have a standard. They have to abide by a standard with stuff. We also heard this example, which is something that I also care very deeply about, with renewable energy. And so a lot of the GCs are required to do things with green buildings and things like that.
Yes.
And a lot of them are not happy about that. That's why Christian was probably laughing.
Yeah,
about
they're very
it
unhappy with that. But I was actually laughing. I just saw a video the other day. It's when people anti-market, when they find like the going against the new trendy grain, I always find that very clever. So I saw a video, it was like a 30-second video of a whole bunch of kids going, I can't wait to grow up and work for a woke company. I can't wait to grow up and be completely filtered for what I say, and then it's like 6 basic things that you say, like that are looked at by HR as a bad thing. That's just very common saying that means nothing bad at all.
Yeah.
And then it's like another kid going, I can't wait to work so hard to gain skills and then be hired for my color. And then it was like Red Bloom, work for companies who are not woke.
Yes. Yes.
And I was like,
that's an interesting message.
It is.
I was like, interesting. And I bet that's going to hit.
Yeah, it is.
I bet that'll hit a niche. I bet that'll hit a conservative niche as hard and as heavy as the liberal niche.
Yeah.
I never thought about that,
Mm-hmm.
which I should have, because that when you make such a polar opinion, there's always the gap.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they played the gap hard on that video.
They did.
Yeah. I want to shift gears just slightly here, but I want to talk a little bit about company culture. I love talking about that, and Chris is probably going to roll his eyes in the back of his head because he hates when I get on a tangent talking about this stuff. But we've been lucky enough to meet a lot of the folks at SpeedSpark, and first off, I love to see how everybody gets along. And if I can pay a compliment to your company, the people that work at SpeedSpark are brilliant. They're some of the smartest people I've ever met.
But Jimmy, appreciate that.
Yeah, by the way, we're sponsored by
well,
SpeedSpark.
I agree. I'm not really sure why they let me hang around.
Oh, okay. We'll tell you some stories about Michael afterwards. He's a riot. But anyways, so how do you go about in your own words? You developed this company 20-ish years ago or something in the days of the BlackBerry. Did you had this collaboration, growth, innovation? I presume you had that in mind.
Sure.
But did you have anything specifically in mind to create a culture where you're able to hire and retain brilliant folks and also brothers that work together and things like that?
Yeah, we have quite a few of those actually. So there's some fundamental elements. First and foremost, value creation every day required. Mindset, and we first start with an understanding that everybody who has ever made is a genius. There's only a small percentage that will try to find and create their environment to leverage their genius. That is my wiring.
Wow.
When I talked earlier about looking at people's businesses who are just running on a hamster wheel, doing the convention and creating either the conventional result or less than the result, when I look at them, I am looking at them just the same way as I looked at Michael, as the gentleman that you mentioned earlier. Who is Michael? I understand what he wants to be. I understand what his title is if he came from another organization, but that's reading the label on the outside of the bottle. What's inside the bottle? So just the same as I approach businesses to understand the resources that are their immediate command and disposal, how can they be recombined for much more value? I envision this the same way as talent on the team, as they come from somewhere else and they've had a different job. But if you look a little bit deeper and understand, one, do they have a collaborative mindset? Do they have a growth mindset required? And do they wholeheartedly believe that they were made unique, truly unique, and they're the best in the world at doing one thing? If we can find that thing together, independent of whatever title you had at whatever organization, and provide you the environment to excel with that unique capability or unique ability, then we all win.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. I'm not trying to steal your secret sauce here or anything, but just strictly out of curiosity, if when you go through the hiring process, like what types of questions do you ask your interviewees to try to identify what's inside the bottle, so to speak?
There's one particular question. There's a question that Dan Sullivan created. Are you guys familiar with Dan Sullivan's strategic coach? It's the R factor question. Have you ever heard of it as well? Okay. So we're sitting here 3 years from now. You know exactly how old you'll be. And we're looking backwards. And we're looking backwards. And it's been the best 3 years ever.
Yeah.
What had to happen personally and professionally for you to be able to say, well, it was the best 3 years ever? And then just shut up.
And let them just tell a story.
Sometimes they will talk for an hour.
Wow.
You will yield all the information that you would need from all these regimented questions that somebody else is going to ask. And okay, next question is, and we're going to bring Joey in. He's going to ask also a regimented group of questions. Let them talk. Let them tell you exactly who they are, what means something to them, how they view the future. Because there's one quote, and I keep this thing called true wisdom. So when I run across a quote, I typically read 2 or 3 books a week, and I consume a wealth more content. And I'm looking for specific things that I can understand and put into practical application. So they're theories that you can make practically applicable to help and empower others. But one particular one I read years ago, the only thing that matters is someone's future and how you can help them get to it. So whenever you ask that question, Dan's an absolute genius. I'm very fortunate to spend a decent amount of time with him. That particular question empowers someone to paint their future and for you just to sit back and listen. Now, through that process and listening to them, there will be components of this perceived position that you think they're best at that you can ask some complementary questions to validate your personal theory, but letting that question open them completely up paints a picture of the future that now you can see.
And how they build that future would tell you if they're ambitious, if they have a growth mindset, like just their ideas of how they would have to accomplish stuff.
Christian's going to take that on our next hire, just so you know.
I love that question. I hate boring interview questions.
Oh my God, it's so funny you just said that. That's exactly what I was about to say. Like when we first opened business, 2017, and we were hiring and stuff like that. You know, me being me, I come up with a couple of questions beforehand, and Christian was like, "Don't do that." So but we've kind of evolved into
so lame.
Yeah, into free flow type of thing.
I tell you, it's funny.
Yeah,
I am constantly interviewing.
Yeah.
I'm constantly interviewing businesses. I've done it since day one.
Sure.
Running around serving businesses, and I had no formal education or background, so I was just a sponge. I do the same thing with talent. So I've hired an exorbitant amount of folks from valet stands.
Wow, so that's interesting.
And some of the actually best developers. Because what I was able to find is those guys who are parking cars, the way that they engage with you, can they look you in the eye? Are they personable?
Right.
Where did they bring your car up? Did they think about where to park their car? Like it's just how much intentionality do they have around what they're doing? And then ask them a couple of questions. Of course, we're all creatures of habit to some degree. Here in town, I go to a lot of the same places for lunch and dinner. And you just watch them over a period of time where they engage with other people. And then you find out that they're going to school for coding or Siegel background, whatever it is that they're doing. Well, heck, we're looking for somebody like that, and I just connect them with my internal resources. I already know who they are as a person.
Wow.
And they're validating that they're going to get skills, and they are investing in their education, and they're okay actually doing it the hard way, manually, while they're working on something bigger and better. So you're looking at things that are not the label on the outside of the bottle, but who are they internally, and what are they showing you already that it doesn't take a question to get the answer? Yeah. So
that's
helpful, but hopefully.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant.
It brings me to a position that's like just doing so well right now. Software engineers. That is such a sought after position right now. They were interviewing a whole bunch of them, and people with 1 year experience making $180,000 salary. I was like, that's unheard of back in the day. Like,
yes, of course.
You could barely get $100,000 salary for working as anything.
That's right.
You were kicking tail.
They're crushing it. Yeah. Some of those guys are. One idea, I look for things that are pivot trajectories, right? So somebody's going along a particular line, and just say that line is flat. Where's the inflection point that we can help them with that changes their trajectories? Here's the pivot point. So those particular guys, when they focus on the business, not so much their craft, fundamentally, value creation, of course, and I understand that, but when they focus on the business, they do have the capability of moving mountains for not a lot of effort. So if I were one of those guys currently, I would study business relentlessly because you already have the capabilities to move mountains. Practical application of your theory that you learned in school is where you create value. And that, of course, will yield the $180,000 a year in salary. Yeah,
it's a crazy world we live in, isn't it? I mean, all the changes, and COVID was certainly a factor, but we see all these just crazy different things from, even if COVID wasn't a thing, 2024 versus 2014 type of thing, like with careers and with skill sets, and like you were talking about soft assets versus hard assets, and intellectual property and things like that. So it's exciting to see the next step. And
change is fun.
Yeah, it is.
You mentioned COVID. So COVID created something. I've got this one methodology that I use, and I've used for a very long time. It's called remove the film. Film stands for me. It stands for friction identification, leverage the market. So when something like COVID happens, or a recession, or even a depression, yay. I mean, not yay for the impact negatively to people. I don't mean that whatsoever. I'm just saying there's change. That's going to cause friction. What do people typically do when their business, when they're hearing about friction? Run away from it. Ignore it. It's very, very common. I'm wired up just a little bit differently, and I want to embrace it. Some of my most successful businesses with no competition and certainly no compression on margin is because I was aware and listening to the friction, which, by the way, frictions are pretty easy to pick up on.
Sure.
You probably heard some this morning.
Yeah.
They are delivered in a format called complaints.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if you, and you probably, now that I'm exposing you to this methodology, there's probably one that you hear on a very consistent basis.
Sure.
So I typically ask questions after that. If I resolve this for this particular company, it could be one of my own, is it just going to help this company? Or does it help every company that looks like this company in the local area? Or everyone that's in the industry? Does it help everyone in North America, or maybe the entire planet?
Mm-hmm.
If I get a couple yeses, and you mentioned how many organizations that I've created, bought, or sold, I would go and create a company if whoever I was solving that for did not also have the same vision of the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of them in $20 million a year recurring businesses.
Yeah.
That creates a lot of enterprise value.
For sure.
So it's not that I would want COVID to happen again, of course, and likely it will. Anytime there's massive change in an industry, one thing I've always started, for some reason, I've started a lot of businesses during downturns in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
Probably when you hear the most complaints.
Yeah.
The most complaints, and everybody's running one way, and like, hold up, over here's the value.
Right.
And by the way, if you fix it, guess what? Everybody who's complaining has validated depth of market. Give them a solution, make it easier for people to do business with you,
Mm-hmm.
solve their needs.
It reminds me of Warren Buffett. He has a quote. He says, "When there's blood in the streets, you'll catch me buying stock." Like
Yes,
it's the same
Yeah,
type
it's
of.
just
His version
mindset.
sounds nice.
Yours
Yeah.
version is way better.
Yeah,
So
blood in the streets, yeah,
so ultimately, what we've learned today is that Chad Jenkins is intellectually superior to Warren Buffett. That's it.
I'd say there's a quote by Charlie Munger that I use on a personal level as well.
Sure.
And he said, "I'll never have an opinion until I understand the opposing party's perspective better than they do."
Oh wow.
Try to live by that.
Yeah.
God, I don't think anybody tries to live.
Nobody. Yeah.
Yeah. So
That
it's
reminds me of
extremely strong.
Abraham Lincoln. When he was the president, he appointed his cabinet with people that had the most differing points of view.
Mm-hmm.
Like he said, "What's that? You don't agree with anything I have to say? You're on the team."
You're in, yeah.
You're in. That was his qualification for it.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah. Which is diversity, right? Because he
Yeah.
understood the value that could be created
Right.
from bringing those diverse, different thought patterns and also perspectives. The sum of all is going to create the value.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is okay to invest in. Going back to something that you mentioned earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've started a bunch of different businesses, and of course, it begins at BlackBerry, goes to SpeedSpark, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any specific business or project or whatever, any business development that you've been a part of in your life that you're particularly the most proud of, or something that you're like, wow, you look back and you're like, wow, I did that
He
type
has
of
50
thing?
kids. He can't
Well,
tell you that one is favorite.
Yeah. So
tell me a good story. That's all I want.
So I've been, and we touched on it a little bit, and it's the practical application of these theories. I'm sure folks who are listening to this podcast are
Mhm.
also avid readers and content subscribers, and they're constantly looking for, how do I take this information and create an edge for me or who I serve? Looking at all these different businesses, I was chastised for a long time. I was like, "Oh, you continue to change." I'm like, "I'm not changing. I'm just evolving."
Mhm.
And they say, "Why do you need so many businesses?" What do you mean? I'm here just to create value, and when I find it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not tied to any one particular business. I'm tied to what is the driving factor underneath all of the businesses. So I began about 3 or 4 years ago focusing on what is it that I personally am actually uniquely capable of, and I want to put words around it, and then I want to turn it into a business. So like always, it's typically sitting right in front of you.
Mhm.
I'd even named a company that was complementary to what it is that I have the ability of doing. So SpeedSpark's name, as I mentioned earlier, seed the idea, spark the growth. It's all about growth innovation. In all of these particular businesses, I can peel back the onion to where I remove the film, right? I've identified the friction,
Heard the complaints.
heard the complaints,
Yeah.
and then leverage the market. It's the same thing in every one of these businesses I've been doing. So for me, it is the awareness and being present enough to say, what am I doing here? What have I done that actually created value and impacted so many? And it is growth innovation, not growth and innovation. And I say it specifically, it's two words that are combined, growth innovation. So it's an innovative way to create growth. It is not a conventional way to create growth. We all know if you go hire 10 more salespeople and they make X amount of calls, it's going to produce X amount of additional revenue. Like, you can do that if you want to. I'd rather take your existing resources and 10x them and create that revenue and certainly increase that margin way better than the guy down the street. How about we have that conversation first? You can still do it the other way. And matter of fact, you can take my collaborative way, and when it 10x's your revenue and doubles your profit along the way, if you decide you want to go do it the conventional way, which a lot of people will go back to what they know and do the comfortable, they have plenty of cash to do it.
Yeah.
And they can hire the sales team 2 or 3 times, come up with 4 or 5 different comp plans, and waste all that money.
Yeah.
Or they can just, as I mentioned, 3x their sales team through collaboration.
Collaboration is way easier than outside sales programs.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh, the sales plans that I've come up with. And I'm not that good at it. It's very funny. And you guys asked me about interviewing earlier. I was trying to remember the last time I've been in a conventional sit down.
Yeah.
Bring your, and it's not a clipboard, you say, I guess, bring your Surface or your tablet, and we're going to go to an interview. Yeah, it's been many years.
Right.
Many years. Though I am constantly interviewing for talent.
Right.
And also businesses and business models that I can see a way to create more value.
Yeah, I'm like mind blown that you've hired a lot of people from valet stands. You almost wonder if there's some synchronicity between people that valet and interest in coding or interest in development.
Here's another one.
Just for food, yeah.
Because everyone listening to this podcast likely today either 1 or 3 times is going to go somewhere to eat.
Right.
Wait staff.
Yeah. That we've done a lot, but yeah.
If you really think about it, like, yes, we and of course I own companies, many of them, that do some level of technology, and it's awesome. Who do you use that technology for? Humans.
Right.
So instead of until robots start doing business with robots, I focus a lot on humans.
Right.
2026.
Yeah, it's coming.
Potentially. But until that time, I certainly try to focus on folks who can have a real communication with humans, and that listen first, not for the intent to reply, but for the intent to understand.
Yeah.
You can see that in waitstaff a lot. And
Sure.
we've all been in restaurants, and it's pretty conventional, right? What can I get you guys to drink? Would you like anything from the bar? Here's our special. It's very regimented. But there's a clear difference in somebody who comes up with the intent to understand what can enhance your experience versus the intent to reply, the special is.
Right.
Leverage it.
Yeah. Gosh, I feel like sometimes, people say something and it brings up something that happened very recently, And so I was out on a date at dinner at STK here in Charlotte. I love that place. It's not for everybody. It's like loud music, but great steak restaurant type.
The one in Toronto is awesome.
Is it? I'm actually going to the one in Las Vegas on Friday. So
that would be different.
I love STK. But anyway, I don't want to get off on that tangent. But my server, and I'm not saying this lightly, my server was the best server I've ever had, ever.
Like, because you couldn't hear him.
That's possible.
Yeah,
but he just,
very funny.
even the person I was with was like, wow, he's totally picking up on your vibe. That's what she said verbatim. We were joking around, and he took the time to speak with us and stuff. And I just,
feel it.
I need to go back and hire him for something. That's the type of person. I love.
You train him to do the other stuff.
Yeah, that's true. But I'll tell you, he's the best server I've ever had, ever.
It's super awesome.
Yeah.
So my wife jokes that I'm not human, and because I'm in my head 100% of the times, but I do try to human, and I read a lot of books. There's a book called The Like Switch, which is awesome. Ex FBI and CIA, and there's one currently I'm reading, Clear Thinking by a guy named Shane Parrish, which also is ex CIA. There's another book, How to Read Humans. How to read humans. All of these things are empowering. There's so much communication that happens non-verbal, and I expect if you would go back to that particular event, yes, there were words, of course, transmitted. There's a lot more going on. First,
for sure,
foundationally, energy. When he came up to the table, he or she, I'm not sure.
Yeah, he.
So energy.
His name is Michael. I still remember it.
Positioning.
Wow.
What's their body doing? What's their inflection like? And then, yes, of course, what are the words? But even more than what are the words, what's the sequencing of the words? And can you interpret, because you will subconsciously, you interpret the meaning behind the words. So I do that when I read. It's like, okay, yeah, sure, I can read the words very fast now, even though I didn't really start till I was 35. I can read the words very fast, but I'm always looking, what's inside of the words? What the heck is the meaning behind all these words that are used? Folks that do what you mentioned, you're experience with this waiter is like, I would love to go back and just see it play out
Mhm.
and pick out what is actually happening here.
Right.
And it wouldn't be the exact words that are being used.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
But until you're intentional about getting to that level, what I find most are just kind of they're going through life, but they're bouncing off life.
Mhm.
I always want life to bounce off of me. So just a different degree of intentionality. And it sounds like this waiter and experience that you had
Mhm.
was extremely intentional.
Oh yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah, it was incredible. I can't wait to go back. I mean, I like the restaurant anyways. So, but I mean, I'd never do this, and Christian can attest to that. But like, I would never ask for a particular server unless I was like friends with them or knew them or something like that.
Yeah.
Guarantee I'll ask for him, like 100% chance. So.
That's awesome.
Well, as we run out of time here, Mr. Jenkins, man, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a great show.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to send this to all of your SpeedSpark peoples that we're lucky enough to be able to know and associate with. I always try to sign off by asking a fun or funny question.
Sure.
So here's my fun or funny question. Name SpeedSpark something else. If you were gonna name it like completely something different, what would you do?
Interesting.
It's tough, right?
It wouldn't be so tough for me because I name things for businesses definitely on a daily basis, but probably multiple times a day. But there's a lot of intentionality around the naming. So if I were to rename SpeedSpark, it would absolutely be centered around something that aligns with the delivery or perception of value that is created or delivered.
Okay.
That would be it.
Okay.
So that's where my mind goes immediately, so that when you read this particular word, you're like, oh yeah, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Joey told me to call him. I'm looking for exactly that outcome.
Right.
And heck, the name even mentions it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's
Makes
what I would
perfect
do.
sense. Yeah, that's
So,
awesome.
I mean, I applied a good bit of thinking to SpeedSpark. I also give absolute credit. The first two developers that I hired to build an application that include all the business logic to manage people's wireless bills. Because at that time, I mentioned all those guys in the construction trade. What was the commonality of friction? Their bill was messed up.
Oh yeah.
What are the facts? Well, all of my people have to know the new rate plans, and it's simple math to project trending. But I was growing so fast, I couldn't hire people fast enough. So that's what made me go and get the software guys. Those two guys, one particular guy, he works for Aon Hewitt on the Apple account. His name is John Gwynn. He was very instrumental in helping name SpeedSpark.
Oh, cool.
But it's complete intentionality as to what it is. I'm unlimited ideas for growth, but it has to take action.
Yeah.
So I mentioned practical application of the theory. Who knows? Maybe it would be some combination of practical application.
Yeah.
Because there's so many good ideas out in the world.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of conduit for folks that are going to help you make that actionable.
Right.
And I absolutely hang out in that space.
Yeah.
So
That's amazing.
I know that's not a name.
Well, no,
give me about
but
5 more minutes, I'll come up with one.
we'll come up with a couple fun ones at lunch, and we're not rebranding SpeedSpark, but I just think it's fun to have that mental exercise.
Yeah, it's a great one.
So, well, Chad, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we're
Absolutely.
looking forward to lunch, man. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, John.
Oh, you forgot to clap.